Maltese people, sometimes it's a bit of an insular society. We always think our little island. But esports is not like that. Esports is very non-local. Esports is a global thing. So limiting yourself to what you can achieve in your country will only limit yourself. A very big benefit of actually working with a regulator, not just the MGA, right? It gives you a very good base on which to start your career, whether that's financial services with the MFSA, compliance, the FIU with AML, but also if you're a lawyer working with the Attorney General's office, you're thrown into the fire, you need to get out of it on your own.
With me today, I have the lovely Michele Magro. Mikel and I go back quite a bit. We've been gamers since we were...
I think probably 13, 12
Yes.
years old, 13 years old. You were one of the first teammates I ever had in a video.
Same. Cyber Demon.
Yeah.
Remember that nickname?
Yeah.
That was him, not me.
So was equally
Death Row.
Yeah.
Still, actually, there are other people that still call me Death Row, which is pretty. I don't know. As a 13-year-old, you want something hardcore, I guess, to cover it up. But more notably, throughout your achievements, you are head of legal and compliance. Are you the head of legal and compliance for a particular company, or are you for like a group of companies?
For a particular company, well, it has a group of companies, but I'm specifically related to EU matters. European matters, so specifically parts of the company.
And you also own a gaming organization called Eversio, which I've been very proud to be a part of.
Yeah.
In multiple different games.
Yeah.
Still going strong. You were at PlayCon last week.
Yeah, we're going on. It's our 16th year actually. And I actually don't own it because it's set up as a voluntary organization. It's not a company. It's a voluntary organization, and as a voluntary organization, you don't own assets of the voluntary organization. You don't own shares of the voluntary organization. It's just an entity that has a specific purpose that you're required to carry out. It's a fully legally established entity, tax registered and everything. But I don't really own it. We run it. We have our AGMs as any other VO. Yeah, that's how it works.
And I was a very active member of Eversio in the past as well. I'm not a very active member these days, but I'm still in the back cheering whenever I see anything Eversio related. So it has been doing really, really well lately as well. Do you want to actually, before we go into it, let's just kind of talk a bit about yourself and just kind of see where you came from. So you obviously achieved a lot in your professional life, but you also have an entrepreneurial spirit that you've been feeding as well, which I've noticed over the years. So that's very cool that you managed to balance the two.
Balancing is an interesting choice of words. So I hesitate a bit to call myself having a very strong entrepreneurial spirit. I do try, but I don't think it's innate in me, actually. A lot of my friends actually make fun of me because I'm really bad at billing and issuing proper bills and so on. So, but yes, I do my best. I've done my fair share of my own business, my own consultancy. Nowadays, I'm employed, full-time employee as with pretty much the biggest poker company in the world, or rather I should say biggest poker room in the world, not biggest poker company.
Poker room?
Yes, poker network. So company is a company that has X number of employees, X number of business, X number of turnover. Room means, the total number of people who are actually playing on that network. So you can imagine kind of like, you can say a game is the biggest game if it belongs to the biggest company. If Blizzard Activision is the biggest company and has 200,000 concurrent players on World of Warcraft, but then the other metric is what? Number of employees of Blizzard, which is what? 10,000. If you take Fortnite, Fortnite might be a bigger game because they have 300,000 concurrent players, but the number of players working with Epic Games is 5,000. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for using a gaming analogy to explain to me iGaming and how methodology. That's really cool. You can see where this episode is going. We're just going to talk about video games for like an hour.
No need actually. I wish video games were more prominent in my life, but unfortunately, they're not as prominent as I wish they were.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
But we grow up.
But as poker, kind of a lot of the inspiration and a lot of instruction actually does come from video games. I think the monetization of video games is one of the most developed in any industry, pretty much.
Yep, for sure.
Especially mobile phone games, but also things like microtransactions, battle passes, and all this. The monetization that you see in video games is extremely advanced. And comparing it to the gambling world where I come from, well, I come from both worlds, but the gambling world where I come from, actually, like people talk about addictiveness of gambling. Video game companies have addictiveness pinned down to the T.
It's psychology.
Nowhere close to what gambling companies.
You can even pinpoint the time when video games moved away from just the game being entertaining, but rather designed to just hook you into
playing. Everything, not just hook you into playing, not just spending time, but also spending money.
Absolutely.
I'm very interested in, for example, the psychological way of how mobile phone games are developed, right?
Yes.
So we have all of these mobile games that you play. You need to log in at a specific point in time where you need to log in to get extra points. You have the concept of energy to make a number of moves. You can even so imagine a video game where you have to spend currency to actually play. That is what mobile games are, right? And when currency finishes, you're asked, well, do you want to pay for extra currency
or do you want to
actually
wait?
Play, or do you want to wait? That in itself is already a big thing. The more you play, the more you level up, the higher you go. But unless you pay, you will never reach the ceiling. So you're forced to always play catch up. And this mechanic of a catch up basically is the biggest hook for competitive people to say, listen, I want to be the best at this game, but to be the best at this game, I need to spend X amount. That's why, like the biggest AAA titles make nowhere as much money as your standard popular mobile game.
Candy Crush.
I mean, maybe Candy Crush is not always the best of examples. I mean, probably it makes a lot of money, but there are other game examples, a bit more hardcore games that, easily make hundreds of millions a month just on the basis of microtransactions. You're not purchasing energy, you're only purchasing a right to play the game. Or you're purchasing it's also separate to the idea of skins, right? That's a separate monetization model that plays on the fear of missing out. So PC games especially play on this element of human psyche, the fear of missing out. Mobile games play on this idea of catch up. You need to spend more money, more time to catch up to become the best at the game.
To keep up with the big players.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Gone are the days where you would buy a game that is completed, ready for you to, and then you just finish it, there are
some good examples of those games.
They still really if you look at the stuff Rockstar releases, for example, they just release a finished product.
Yes.
With how long has GTA 5 been out? 10 years. I think a good 10 years now, right? And now they've just announced GTA 6, which is the trailer. It looks pretty cool.
There are very good examples of games that, in my opinion, are pretty much art forms. You have storytelling, you have design, you have acting, everything in them.
And they're doing well. And you'll notice that they're doing well now.
Yeah.
Because we went through a phase where it was just rather than quality release, it was release first, like as in just release it quickly as possible, and then you get games like Cyberpunk, right, which failed miserably at first, and then they built it up. Like No Man's Sky, same, failed miserably, and then they built it up. Like Anthem, which was just flopped, right? And then it was refreshing when you have games like
although I disagree on the Cyberpunk push by the media that it wasn't a finished game. It was actually a very, very good game on launch.
Yes, but I think it garnered a really bad reputation because it was delayed by so many times.
Listen, there are so many examples of this. In gambling regulation, we also speak about a very particular game, which is Battlefront 2, which apparently was the catalyst of loot boxes and pay to win. So Battlefront 2 created a huge issue with regulators around the world when it came to kind of like mixing gambling with video games.
Yes.
You have a Star Wars game that appeals to children and it has gambling elements. those gambling elements had been in games for decades and no one batted an eye. But because it was a big title by a big company and it was a big IP, and it generated all that hullabaloo. The irony was that they removed most of that stuff before the game even launched, and it still got the reputation of being, a terrible game for kids.
Didn't that, I think, trigger, like, the Netherlands have completely banned it, right? Like, there's no loot boxes at all.
Netherlands and Belgium.
And Belgium.
Yeah. There were some legal cases actually, though, in both countries, where I believe the game companies managed to at least partially turn it around. I think EA specifically with FIFA, with FIFA packs.
The FUT one.
Yes. Which I think is one of the biggest banes in video games.
What,
especially
FIFA?
No, the foot system, right?
Yes,
basing a whole esports franchise on the basis of pay to win. I think it's a tragedy, but it makes a lot of money.
So is FIFA esports played via the FUT?
Yes.
So it's
not only, but the main competition, the official competition, is played via FUT. Yes.
Of course, we have to promote it and make money somehow.
Yeah.
And it's a game that releases every year as well.
It's Borderlands cap.
For someone who's been gaming for a long time, since I can remember, you can see the evolution that now requires you to have to spend money. And to be fair, now that I'm older, like I avoid to try and spend money on like skins and stuff, but sometimes I still do, because you'll be like, you're playing a character that you really enjoy playing, and you're like,
But FIFA is not skins.
FIFA is actual power, like player power.
Yeah. So you're paying €60 a year to buy the game, and then in order for you to actually be good at the game, you need to spend money. I mean, some people don't spend money, right? But I know competitive players who, on a yearly basis, spend something like €2,000 to be competitive. You're not getting anything more than you got last year, but every year the investment that you made in your whatever players cards gets reset. And then
crazy world. But listen, if people have money to spend it and they want to spend it on video games, who am I to judge?
Yeah, correct.
Ultimately. Let's just kind of take a step back, and because we kind of went on a bit of a digression, which will happen across this whole podcast. But talk me through why you chose to pursue the legal path, right? To pursue law initially.
I was very confused as to what kind of career path I wanted to take on, and I really liked foreign affairs. I always really liked foreign affairs and history. My guidance teacher back at school said kind of you should possibly look at something like international relations. However, kind of international relations on its own, sometimes it's quite hard to find a career path on that. Actually, you had a previous course mate of mine in your previous podcast, Luca. He was a classmate of mine in the international relations course at university.
Shout out to Luca.
Very good guy. And but I was always, I'm not extremely ambitious, but I am ambitious when it comes to my career, in terms of like, I wanted something that made me money. So law was that career path that eventually I pursued. So at university, when you're in the legal course, at least back in my day, you used to choose a main career path and like a subsidiary area. So my main area was law. My subsidiary area was international relations. So international relations is what I was passionate about. Law was the necessity, I would say, I guess. And then maybe in my third year of studies, I saw an advert on the faculty notice board that a specific company was looking for interns. Didn't actually say what company it was. I phoned up the number. Turned out to be the Lotteries and Gaming Authority. So it's actually a government agency, right? I applied after 6 months and 2 interviews. I got the position, and I was an intern there for almost 2.5 years. I was given a full-time position, and the rest is history. That's how I got into the gambling world and compliance and all that kind of stuff. And I'm still there.
Compliance is a big hot topic right now in the gaming industry, and it's also there's a big job market for it as well.
Yeah.
So how does one get into compliance? Like, does someone have to study law to get into it?
No, it's not necessary to study law. I think law helps. It's a really good career path, but in gambling companies specifically, sometimes you have two different job titles that sometimes are intermingled. One is legal, one is compliance. Legal and compliance are two distinct paths, right? Sometimes there are people who are able to do both, but they're very different in nature. If you're a lawyer, you can do either or, you can do both. But if you do both, it will be challenging because the legal part is related to, but completely separate to compliance, right? So with the legal part, you're dealing with litigation, you're dealing with IP, you're dealing with data protection, you're dealing with all sorts of stuff. Like compliance is being compliant with the law, right? So obeying your policies and procedures, sometimes drafting your policies and procedures, laws about litigation sometimes, and contracts or commercial matters. That it's not a question whether something is legal or not legal, but it's something that me and you are writing a piece of paper to agree kind of, and we want to make sure that that piece of paper covers any possible occurrence, covers all elements of risk. So a big part of law is trying to foresee what risks might come up and how you're going to deal with them in a contract. So it's a different position to compliance, but also you have to be aware of risks. But those risks are not necessarily of a commercial nature, but they're of a potentially money laundering nature or any other nature. So it's two different worlds, right? So I think for people who want to get into legal and compliance, there's two parts. You could do both. You could do just one. There are people who do either or. I think my way of getting into the industry was actually potentially like a shortcut compared to most, because working with the regulator, I think, gives you a very broad oversight into kind of what every other company is doing. You grow quickly, right? I think that is one of the very big benefit of actually working with a regulator, not just the MGA, right, where I was, but also any other regulator in Malta gives you I think a very good base on which to start your career, whether that's financial services with the MFSA, if you're into compliance, the FIU with AML, but also if you're a lawyer and you really want to know the ins and outs of how things work, working with the Attorney General's office, for example, you're thrown into the fire, you need to get out of it on your own. So I think it's a really good career to actually, I think, speaking for experience, at least my experience, that starting from the public sector and then moving to the private sector, I think gives you a good idea of kind of what to expect, more than kind of if you're originally already in the private sector. Not to the private sector, but I think it's just a good starting point.
With a
you know what the expectations of if you're in compliance and you've worked with the regulator, you know the regulatory mindset. You know what the regulator is going to look for. You know what the regulator can see and what they can't see.
So you can start drafting already structures.
Yes, you know what risk is that you're going to be found non-compliant on one thing. You know how to structure documents in a way that the regulator likes to structure them. Even simple things, right? If you have extremely complicated policies and procedures and you're being audited, the auditor is going to get bothered by having to read 150 pages of repetition, unstructured documents. If you prepare it in real nice, legible, easy to follow manner, then a regulator will say, okay, this ticks all the right boxes, I'm done in 30 minutes. It's these small things that I think overall, generally help you. I mean, again, looking back, kind of, if you're working, for example, for a law firm when you were just out of university, I think you actually get a much broader idea generally of the law around you than what you do at the regulator. You don't, you do specialize, but not as much as you do when you're at the regulator. So you do miss out on certain things. But then kind of, law nowadays is so vast that it's not like 20 years ago, let alone 60 years ago, kind of, that a lawyer could be like an expert on everything. You have to specialize, like you have to have your niche, and there are people who will try to focus on many areas at the same time, but I can guarantee that they can't be an expert.
What about the changing landscape in terms of legal and compliance? So obviously, me coming from the banking sector, there is I've seen that landscape change over the last 10, 15 years as well. And I can see now similar challenges within the gaming sector over the last 5, 6 years, where initially it was the Wild West, where everyone did what they wanted.
Very much so.
Free for all. Then you get the initial, like the primordial kind of starting, regulatory structures forming. And now I think we're at a stage where it has reached a good density in terms of how you need to navigate around gambling, because let's face it, gambling it can get out of hand quickly if it's not regulated.
I think nowadays gambling is actually I wouldn't say more strictly regulated than banks. It's not, but you have such a huge volume of different requirements that are in some ways similar to banking regulation. But then there's one aspect that the banking sector does not have, which is that's if you're a bank licensed in Malta, you that's it. You got your Maltese license. Like Revolut has its license from Lithuania or wherever, and that's it. In gambling companies, you need to get a license from each and every different jurisdiction where you're from. So if you want to operate in Malta, in Germany, and in Sweden, you need 3 licenses, 3 completely different legal regimes, 3 different regulators to deal with. That doesn't exist in financial services. So I did a small stint in the financial services sector. I was at the MFSA for 1 year. That gives you a good impression, I think, overall of kind of like how vast the financial services sector is. It's sort of like gaming. You have, one set of rules. This is gambling. And that's it. Financial services, you have insurance, you have banking, you have FIs, you have CSPs. Nowadays, somehow they fall under the MFSA as well. The MFSA is like 5 times the regulator the MGA is when it comes to kind of what it needs to regulate. There are a lot of overlaps, especially with things like AML.
AML is just like, the red flags you need to look out for AML can be across different industries, I think.
It's across different industries, but the topologies between different sectors are also very big. So even if I had to compare land-based gambling, like casinos, to online gambling, you can't approach land-based gambling in the same AML mentality, if we're talking about AML, kind of in the same way that you would for in online gambling. It's a different market. There are different risks. There are different products. There are different people who play. One you have cash, the other you don't have cash. So you're looking at a fraud risk that is higher than the land-based, because in land-based you're seeing them face to face. Like when it comes to AML is actually fun because it's extremely dynamic, and the way kind of the law is structured is that it leaves quite a bit up to kind of the subject person, the bank, the gaming company, the insurance company, whatever, to identify its risks and then to create a system to tackle those risks. That's the general idea of AML.
So for Malta specifically, how did the scandals and stuff that happened around AML over the God knows how many years ago now, how did that impact the gaming world directly, the iGaming world directly?
It did impact, especially in terms of reputation of the country, right? But I don't necessarily think. I think it only exacerbated it. So the element of kind of like lack of gambling in itself is not a very reputable sector, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you have a huge mass of gambling companies, pretty much the whole European online gambling landscape was based in Malta, and then all of a sudden Malta has 2 big banking scandals. It just adds to the pain, I think. So before the big banking scandals, I think Malta had already severe reputational issues. Understandably so when it came to online gambling. Yep. I think what happened with the banks and what happened with greylisting and everything just made it bigger.
Where do you see it going? So when it comes to the gaming industry,
that's an interesting question. Honestly,
it feels like the golden years of the gaming industry in Malta, at least, have gone.
This is the thing, right? I don't think, kind of in terms of number of gambling companies in Malta, I think Malta probably plateaued a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. As you said, kind of the gambling landscape has changed a lot. So gambling in Malta started with being kind of the reason why. So let's take it back a bit. So online gambling started pretty much in some offshore jurisdictions, or what we call offshore jurisdictions, like in countries like probably Isle of Man was the first country that regulated online gambling. So a country similar to Malta, kind of, we saw what Isle of Man was doing back in maybe 2002. By the way, the first law in Malta about online gambling was in 1999. Before we got into the European Union, there was a law called the Offshore Betting Ordinance. So imagine a law called offshore, right? So when you think of offshore, you immediately think of, something slightly shady, right?
Yeah.
That was the first law that Malta dealt with. It was a law that allowed bookmakers to set up an office in Malta, get a license by what was called, I think, the gaming board, which was the casino regulator. There were people dealing with online gambling, right? But you could get a license and you could operate as long as Maltese people were not allowed to play on your website. So you got a license from Malta, but Maltese people can't play. So this is the offshore model, right? In some countries, it's still the same, right? In Curacao, if you get a Curacao license, you can't. Curacao players can't play on your website. That's generally the offshore model. In 2003, that changed with the remote gaming regulations. And by then, it was by design, right? The remote gaming regulations came 1 year after EU accession, and it was by design that it was kind of like the first country in the European Union that regulated online gambling. And now in the European Union, there's the concept of freedom to provide services. So the general idea is, and the freedom of establishment. So the general idea is, if you get an online gambling license in the European Union member state, you can use this license in any other country. So that was like a massive paradigm shift, and the remote gaming regulations were probably for the time pretty good. You had consumer protection measures, you had player fund support. The problem obviously always in Malta is that you have good laws, but then enforcement of those laws
it doesn't happen, or it happens only when there's a scandal.
Yeah. But since then, kind of like the main markets for Malta-based companies were always kind of our European relatives. So principally probably Italy, right? The UK, the biggest markets in the EU are the biggest gambling markets in the EU are Italy and the UK, France and Germany. Those were and Sweden also, because Sweden is a lot of the companies that were innovating in the sector were Swedish, German, and so on. So Italian also. But obviously it didn't take too long for some countries to wisen up. They saw Malta as a problem. Within 5 years, Italy regulated, France regulated. And when I say regulated...
Yeah, I was going to ask, what does that mean?
What that means is that the country created its own regulatory regime. So it said, okay, so currently all these companies are operating from this island in the middle of the Mediterranean. They're not paying tax in my country. I'm losing out. My citizens are, gambling away their money. It's a social problem.
Yeah.
How do I deal with that? I create a law in my country that says that if you want to offer online gambling, you need to get a license from the state of Italy or from France so they outlawed Malta pretty much, right?
Sure.
There was even an incident where I believe the Italian regulator actually geo-blocked the MGA's website. So it got to that level. Yeah.
Okay.
A bit of a diplomatic incident there. So that started. So the moment that started, sometime around 2008, I believe, the Maltese license started losing its glamour. Right?
Wait, 2008?
Something like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that when it started losing? It's because I remember gaming companies actually peaking mid 2010s. No.
Yeah. It started losing maybe countries like Italy and France. And there were still loopholes, right, for some companies to exploit. I'm calling them loopholes. Some others would call them very valid legal arguments. Malta was always arguing the point that the freedom of establishment and the freedom to provide services, these are two elements that are entrenched in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, which is kind of like almost the constitution of the European Union, should apply. And that these countries like Italy, like France, were violating these European freedoms. Mm-hmm. So their laws were not compliant with European law. So basically, the European courts were a battlefield for this fight between kind of like Malta-based gambling companies, online gambling companies, and the other states, right? In most cases, the Maltese companies lost. In a few outlier cases, they won, and those victories were really big for them because that meant a lifeline for them that they could continue operating. And obviously, I mean, when we talk about, for example, Italy regulating, you go from a regime where you're paying something like 1% tax to a regime where you're suddenly paying 30% tax, right? So it's the game changer. Also, a country like Italy limits the number of licenses that are given out. So, you're not guaranteed. So it's a paradigm. So when a country like Italy regulates or France regulates, it means that you can no longer operate freely as you were before. And for your company, it could mean complete demise, right?
Can leave you dead in the water.
Yeah, and many companies. That happened to many companies. I mean, then, in poker, for example, there was Black Friday or Black Monday, I can't remember the actual term, where basically, there were a number of companies, not just only in Malta, but also worldwide, that were servicing US customers. The FBI freezed all of the funds in those accounts, and basically everyone lost their money. And most companies went bust, including some of the biggest operators back then. So yeah, this was happening throughout the 2000s. So you mentioned that in 2010s, 2012s, Malta peaked, and there was I think a very good reason for that, because in that 10-year period, while I think kind of this fight was going on, and there were some victories, some losses, but also some victories, Malta managed to capitalize by basically getting everyone here. So all of the gambling companies somehow ended up establishing shop here. So that created kind of a different value chain for these companies. That was not the tax system in Malta. It was not the fact that there was a European license, which was still available, still valid, perhaps arguably valid in some countries, most notably the UK or Germany, right? I mean, the UK was a valid country to operate in with a Maltese license until 2015. Germany only regulated last 2 years ago. So so there was a whole issue in Germany with it's been through a lot. It's still going through a lot. There's still huge issues going on right now. But overall, I think what Malta has stood firm for in general is that especially big companies and reputable companies were able to kind of, put their feet on the ground and kind of, some of them employ 1,000 people here on the island now. They are the biggest employers, pretty much. They're the biggest.
Do you see a long-term stay of gaming companies in the island? So so I think I remember when they first started and people were leaving the financial sector to go into gaming because, better salaries or the grass is greener situation, or let me try this out and stuff like that. And I know friends and ex-colleagues have made a really good career out of it now. But I used to remember, it's going to be a phase, and this was now 12 years ago, right? So obviously it's not happened. It's remained, and gaming has turned out very rewarding for a lot of people.
And also, you shouldn't look at it as kind of like an industry that is endemic to Malta. It's not. Gambling is one of the oldest industries in the world.
Absolutely.
Kind of if Malta turns out as being no longer a good base for these companies to work out in, I mean, they'll just
move somewhere else.
They'll move somewhere else, and if you're a skilled person, you move with them.
What are your plans now? So obviously you're heading a legal and compliance vertical in a large gaming company, which you don't have to mention. What's next for you? What do you think your next step will be now?
No, I'm pretty happy where I am. It happens to be a growing company, right? So
okay.
It's a company that was created to challenge the status quo. Like in poker, there was always one big behemoth that has been intractable for 15 plus years. This company is the first one to actually put up a proper challenge. So I'm really happy working there because it gives you the not the idea, but the focus that you're basically trying to do something new. You're breaking the status quo. You're moving forward. You're challenging Goliath, and it's
seeing results.
Yeah, it's seeing results. It's also a new company. So in my line of business, kind of like so actually to go back a bit, like one of the reasons why I wanted to leave the gambling authority, the gaming authority, the government, it's was because I spent 9 years between the MGA and the MFSA, right? You get a good idea of what regulation is, how regulators think, and all that stuff.
And at the MGA, you were the head of it, right? You were the head of.
No, I wasn't. I was.
You were heading the legal.
No, not even. I was deputy general counsel until I was in the legal team. So I was second to the general counsel, and then after that, I created my own department, so to speak, which was the International Affairs and Policy Department, and I was the chief officer for the International Affairs and Policy Department. So I moved away from the legal department towards the final 2 years of my stay at the MGA. And then in the MFSA, it was a completely different role. Actually, it was quite related to what I was doing, but I didn't have a department. I was part of the CEO's office. And that was also an interesting kind of period of time, because there, at the end of my tenure at the MGA and during my tenure at the MFSA, my main job was Moneyval and international assessments. So, this was a situation where kind of like, it's all doom and gloom for us compliance people. You're grey listed. It's kind of the biggest humiliation that you can get as a country. Well, the second biggest humiliation, because there's the blacklist, but you get my feeling. And you're trying to get out of it.
How did this all happen, the grey listing? So how did it, coming from the financial sector myself, but obviously not the Maltese financial sector. So I've worked for the UK financial sector most of my banking career. And in the early 2010s, the UK gave Europe a lot of lessons and learns of what not to do. And also of what to do, how to react to it as well, because I think the reaction, the reflex of how the UK ended up regulating all the banking was very good.
Yeah.
And how money laundering regulations ramped up because of the US, the HSBC scandal in the US and Brazil, in South America, sorry. So what did Malta do to get it so wrong that we end up getting grey listed?
I think it was kind of a lot of things at the same time. A lot of people say it's political. I don't believe so. I was very involved in the process, kind of both at the MGA and the MFSA, and perhaps a small part of it was political, but the people kind of like reporting back are always very technical people, and the people in front of you, the examiners, aren't necessarily from a country that's going to pull all the strings. You get examiners from countries like Guernsey, Luxembourg, Italy. So you have a very different variety of assessors in front of you. So when people say kind of like it's political, they the Americans did this or whatever, the British or the Germans did this, it's only part of the story. I think Moneyval in general, there's a lot of different kind of like cogs in the machine that actually work in that way. So if you look overall, I think it was a lack of preparation is a big one. So one of my mentors at the MFSA actually always used to say this, kind of like, you go into Moneyval kind of with the same idea that you're a lawyer walking into a courtroom. You have your defense, you have your proof, you have your weapons, you have your kind of like ace in the hole. You're going to prepare a very strong argument, and you won't be caught off guard, right? You know exactly what you're going to say at every point in time. You know what they are probably going to say. I think Malta had very little of that. I think people underestimated kind of the scope of a Moneyval assessment. I don't want to toot my own horn, but back when we were at the MGA, we prepared years in advance for it, right? We knew it was coming. We had quite a few training seminars kind of on what to expect. We got international consultants that had gone through it time and time again. So we knew we knew what to expect. We were slightly unlucky that the methodology they used when they assessed Malta was a brand new methodology.
Okay.
So in the past, the way Moneyval used to assess things was by looking at the laws. Right? If you have the laws in place, then that's a green light. You're all good, right? When they came to assess us, when was it? 2018, something like that. They used a new methodology which assesses two things: what we call technical compliance, which is whether you have the laws written down in place and in accordance with kind of the standards, the international standards. But then there's the other part, which is the effectiveness part, and the effectiveness part is very hard to prove because you need to show proof that your laws are actually working in practice.
So
now, before
the outcomes are there, yeah.
Before we started the discussion about Moneyval, we both kind of like implicitly agreed that we're good at writing laws, we're not very good at enforcing them. And that's, I think, one of the things that happened. I think there were, for example, issues with having coherent statistics. There were issues that I don't think kind of like there was like a proper person kind of centrally controlling Malta's argument. And then there are issues relating to institution building. So let's take, for example, an entity like the MFSA. Legally speaking, the MFSA is not responsible for anti-money laundering. That repertoire falls to the FIU. Malta has an unorthodox legal system where the money laundering regulator is the money laundering agency. In most other countries in Europe, the money laundering regulator is also what we call the prudential regulator. So when we say prudential regulator, it's the regulator that regulates kind of a specific sector. In Malta, the financial services sector is regulated by the MFSA. The MFSA is the prudential regulator. The MGA is the gambling regulator. But then there's, in Malta, different to most other countries, we have the FIU, who's an AML regulator. So if you're a gambling company or if you're a bank, you have two regulators. You have the MFSA and the FIU. So imagine a situation where someone an assessor approaches the MFSA. They start asking, and it's a money value assessment, so it's largely an AML assessment. They ask them questions, but they don't necessarily know the replies because they're not the AML regulator. So I think the central argument, especially at the start, was extremely weak. There was no joint body kind of trying to be that lawyer that's going to defend that case. So I think our defense was disjointed. We did not collect our statistics collection was pretty bad generally. So I think generally like the different authorities did not properly collect statistics, and without statistics you can't properly show proof that what you're doing is effective. Like something simple as, what is the percentage of banks that you've supervised in the past year, right? If you can't give them that statistic off the top of your head, you're going to fall straight into their kind of trap, right? Yeah. Generally speaking, like things like prosecutions, how many convictions related to money laundering have you managed to successfully carry out in court? What do you think the answer was to that?
I don't know.
Back in the day, At the same time, these assessors come to Malta and all there is blasting on all the news is Daphne's murder, and corruption this and corruption that, and Panama Papers this and that. Yeah. So I think it was a perfect storm that got us into the situation.
I remember saying when all this stuff was happening back to back, because I think it was like from 2017 to like pre-COVID.
Yes.
It just, everything just went to shit.
Yes. Yeah.
But I remember saying, people who obviously, then you'll have people on different sides of the aisle, people who take sides and try and argue. I'm like, it's all going to be beneficial in the long run.
I think generally it was very beneficial in the long run. I think what Malta lost was, it was opportunities. It didn't lose, pretty much didn't lose anything else apart from opportunities. But I think that was a good lesson for us to learn and understand.
I think it's one of the growing pains of a budding.
Yeah, Malta was growing at an extremely fast rate.
Yeah, and still, I think now maybe the last year,
it has slowed
2
down.
years, it's plateaued a bit.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay. It needs to slow down a bit.
Yes. Also, I think a big part of it was also crypto, unfortunately.
Yes. You don't hear crypto that much nowadays. There was a big bang around it, but maybe, to be fair, I have stepped away from the financial sector myself, so maybe that's why I'm not hearing about it that much.
I don't think there's the same level of kind of like promotion. I think we realize that when you have sectors like gambling and crypto, you can't go out there and kind of do the political thing and say, I have the biggest gambling market in Europe, or I have the biggest crypto market in Europe. You need to shut up. You need to you need to be quiet and let your own success do the talking. Like if you're on international media saying that 15% of the local economy is gambling, and then that in every other country in Europe kind of gambling is seen as an epidemic, how do you think that foreign politicians are going to look at you? Obviously, Malta got a bad rep from gambling, and it also got a bad rep, I think, from what it tried to do with crypto, maybe probably even to a lesser extent to crypto, but I think crypto was more kind of like the technical people within things like Manival actually being absolutely worried about it, because crypto has all of the warning signs of money laundering, unfortunately. A lot of it is based on the thing about a lot of theory when it comes to compliance is that someone writes something 20 years ago in a book, right? And everyone keeps on quoting that with no evidence, and nothing to substantiate that. So, you know, like for the past 10 years, we've been saying that online gambling is high risk for money laundering. Okay, but where is the evidence? You know, generally speaking, for everything that we do, we need to provide evidence. We need to provide kind of like proof. But unfortunately, in when it comes to compliance, it's that someone said that in a book 20 years ago.
So that's it. So you have to fix it, or you have to rely on it.
It's hard to fix, I think, preconditioned ideas. I think it's hard to change that aspect, but it is what it is. I think you just need to do it. And I think crypto was like the wrong place at the wrong time. I think we probably...
You think so? Crypto was at the wrong place at the wrong time?
We were at the wrong place at the wrong time. If we weren't doing a Manival evaluation,
because we were becoming like the crypto island, no?
Yeah.
At some point. And that kind of just died off. Or maybe, again...
It died off. I mean, crypto has its own troubles, right? Its own growing pains. Maybe there was a bit too much hype around crypto, not just in Malta, but everywhere. But in Malta, there was too much hype.
Do you think that the rise of crypto was mostly because of the hype of the rise of crypto as well? So, i.e.,
I think there was demand for it. Yes, and I think there still is.
I've not seen many people pay with Bitcoin.
No. There are.
So when's it gonna happen? Yeah. The shift, right?
I mean, if you ask all of the evangelists, you know, they will say, but it's blockchain, it's a technology, it's this and that. I mean, so there were people, sometimes not very technical people, who kept on saying that blockchain will revolutionize the world, which I think there are elements where blockchain can be extremely useful, but there are also kind of a lot of use cases where standard cloud computing or whatever can actually do things better in some circumstances. So it has its benefits, it has its drawbacks. I think people who said it's the next buttered bread or whatever kind of like maybe pushed it too hard. And then us as Maltese, I think we went to the United Nations and said, world, listen to us. We're the tiniest country in Europe, but we want you to adopt crypto the same as we are. That is a bit pretentious, I think, and that I don't think that necessarily put us on the right path. I think things are looking up a bit now with MiCA and with actually European Union regulation. It's a European law that regulates crypto. So with European regulation around that, Malta don't really have much wiggle room. I think the fact that we had the foresight of implementing crypto regulation in a certain way back in the day, back in 2020 or whenever it was, kind of like the smart guys at MFSA knew that kind of it would go down a certain route. It would copy another, would be similar to another particular regime, which was the assets regime in the European Union, and they created a law that was similar to that. So the Maltese law around crypto was already kind of like before the European law was written, was already kind of very similar to what it would become, right? Okay. So now I think, in Malta we have a regulator that understands crypto, understands the risks of crypto pretty well. So in the regulated environment, I think Malta could do well. It won't be the massive blast that you get all of the crypto companies in Malta, and you don't really want them, because we're seeing what's happening, right? We're seeing what's happening with Binance. We're seeing what's happening with FTX. So stability is the way to go.
It's always the same. You'll see it with different industries, right? The rise and fall of the banking industry.
Yeah.
Through late 2000, late noughties, and then the 2010s when it started picking up a bit. But then regulation just hit it so hard that it just stopped banking corporations from essentially hard selling.
Yeah.
And had to really, really, really crack down on regulating their products properly and not. Or bank charges, like bouncing checks and overdraft charges and all that stuff. So we've seen that happen. We've seen that happen in gaming.
But we have a lot of bright sparks for the economy. I think you have a burgeoning like FI sector, financial institutions, like things like electronic money institutions.
Yes. Payment companies, is that
payment
it?
companies, yeah. There's a huge boom of them here in Malta. You have the aviation sector blowing up right now. EasyJet moved planes here. Ryanair moved a huge amount of planes here. So I think Malta's, in terms of economy, it's doing pretty well. I think it's stabilized after greylisting. I don't think greylisting had any lasting effects. I think the bigger challenge is staying out of the greylist, because we have a follow up probably.
When's that happening?
I think next year. So there will be a follow-up by the FATF to see kind of whether we're still kind of maintaining course. And if we manage to plow through that, I think yeah, we're good, in the clear.
Again, it will only do good.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why these bodies exist, right? So keep countries on the right track, I guess. And when you have situations like these happening where it requires these people to step in, good will come out of it in the long run. I at least I'd like to hope so.
No, I think so. And it's also what we're seeing in gambling, right? A lot of smaller companies are leaving, but the bigger companies are.
Why are they leaving?
I think the regulatory requirements are too strict. They no longer have access to most European markets. They're looking at, markets like Asia and South America, where, if you're implementing your strict MGA requirements, you're just going to be uncompetitive. So if you want to operate in a gray or a black market and you're trying to implement high compliance standards, it's just not going to work very well when your competition doesn't have to implement those.
That's true.
So I think Malta will become kind of like a country that is there more for companies that really want to be kind of like,
above board,
and that's a good thing overall.
Yeah, that's true. No, if it keeps, I mean, again, and it's just the knock-on effect it might have, right? If gaming companies shift and move somewhere else, which I don't think will happen, as you said. Like, I think the big companies will stay and will stick around. But one of the big booms that happened with the gaming companies is that there were a lot of people coming here to live in Malta. So then the renting market, like just, and it's still insane.
Yeah, but I don't think the gambling industry is the cause of that.
Not anymore. No. I doubt it is.
Although
I think it sustains it.
Employment within gambling companies is still rising at a very rapid rate.
Yeah.
So the gambling sector, I think, employs something like 10,000 direct or indirect people right now in Malta, according, if I remember correctly. But
that's cool.
That's a very big amount,
It's very good. So let's talk a bit about, first of all, super interesting stuff. You obviously know the law around the topic matter that you are employed in, like the back of your hand. So, well, you should, I guess.
It's been my whole career. So
the head of legal and compliance. Yeah, I mean, like for me, when I left the finance world, like so much about a particular topic, and then now I've moved into tech, and I feel like I just know nothing, even though like I'm okay with tech and I can understand it and I can pick up slowly. It's very painful having to kind of relearn how to walk essentially after running for so long, So totally get what you mean. And you're obviously very, very good at what you do. So
thanks.
Thank you. Very interesting stuff. I don't think we've ever had I think you're the first guest where we've actually talked about particularly the political climate here in the country and all that. Because I usually tend to stay away from that because I focus on the individual. Yeah, but when the individual is involved in the political climate in terms of...
I wouldn't even call it political though.
Oh, I'm sorry, in just general landscape of the country and shaping it in terms of legal and compliance aspect, you kind of have to talk about it, It's hard to...
Yeah, you could speak endless amounts
about
this topic.
It's true. No, it's absolutely true. So, apart from doing this, what you've just talked about for the last hour, you also manage... I use the word own, which I was corrected on, so you don't own it, but you also manage quite passionately Eversio, right? Yeah. Project Eversio. Is it still called? I think it's... Yeah. Is it Project Eversio still?
Project Eversio Esports Club.
Project Eversio Esports Club. I'm not sure I'm legally still a part of it or not.
No, I don't think so.
No, I think I withdrew that because I didn't want to be part of something that I'm not contributing to because of time. But hopefully I can get back into it at some point. And
time, the amount of time that you have at your disposal normally goes down.
Yes, I try to keep it as like a rubber band. You go out, it goes, and then it comes back. But so Eversio has shaped or has fostered winning teams and individuals depending on the games, right?
Yeah.
And you've shifted. I think Eversio started as a Call of Duty
2
or
2.
2. It wasn't like amazing in COD 2, but I think that when you get to 4 is when it started to really shine because you just won every single tournament, I think.
Yes.
So Call of Duty 4 was Modern Warfare.
Yeah.
That's where I stopped playing Call of Duty, I think.
Same.
Right? And then everyone started winning and having fun, of course. But how many years was Eversio like the reigning, leading?
I think it was between Call of Duty 4 was released at the end of 2007, and the last tournament that we played in was 2014.
Right. And you won all of them?
Yes. Obviously, we didn't win the international ones. So
yeah, but all local ones.
Yeah, all local ones. Yes. But that was never our focus, right? So immediately, kind of like, and this was always the mentality of the team leader back then was Matthew. Matthew has this mentality that was always kind of like international competition first. Local competition will just automatically fall through. So in our first tournament, we were massive underdogs. The favorite team actually thought we like that one team that we had beat, they let us win on purpose so that they would have an easier bracket. But then when it came to the finals, we actually defeated them quite easily as well. I think it was the mentality that it was always kind of that we want to do really well in international competition, and local competition was always second. And that mentality kind of we carry on till today. Unfortunately, it's quite difficult to convince Maltese people otherwise. Maltese people, sometimes it's a bit of an insular society where we always think of kind of like, our little island. But esports is not like that. Esports is very non-local. Esports is a global thing. So limiting yourself to what you can achieve in your country will only limit yourself.
If we go back, like if we turn the hands of time to 2007, because esports is very accessible these days. The internet connections are inherently strong. Like you can literally play with anyone wherever. 2007 was a different story.
Yeah.
What Eversio did, in my opinion, was a very revolutionary way of thinking, because back then it was, we're gonna beat, SAS Gaming or KMA, whatever. I remember those teams. Obviously being part of SAS Gaming myself, but and obviously you find it in other sports. You find it in football. Birkirkara is gonna beat Hamrun, and that's all we think about. We don't care about competing in potentially getting into the Champions League or anything, because like that's again, insular society, and goes back to it, and it's something I hate with a passion, that thing, which is why I do my podcast in English. Because I could have done my podcast in Maltese, but I don't want it to just be a podcast where people in Malta have access to it. Yes, it is based on the Maltese landscape most of the time. It is based on Maltese entrepreneurs, because I want to celebrate that. The business landscape in Malta is very different than internationally, because you have a limited pool or a limited market, unless you open an international company, obviously. But going back to my point, very, very different way of thinking, because we don't care about winning local tournaments. We care about winning.
It wasn't just that, also. It was
foreign
a branding thing, for example.
Yeah.
So, in the past, teams had logos. Okay, in the past, teams had websites. But we wanted to do something different. We wanted to create a brand that was going to last in people's minds and whatever. I had been in esports for quite a long time before we created the brand. So we knew how we felt when we spoke about, like the bigger names that we always look up to. So we wanted to do something similar to that. We wanted something that's people will remember, and I think that happened overall. There's always this saying in the local scene, "Jibuhom l'Eversio," that started in 2007, and it still goes until today. It was just one sentence that someone said during a tournament before they were defeated very, very, very badly. So, shout out to Kirsten.
To who?
To Kirsten.
Right.
I think it was an approach where we said, listen, we don't want to just play a video game and maybe beat that other guy who I met on a public server. Like, we wanted to take it a bit to the next level. And I think we managed to achieve that. I mean, we played our first international tournament where we traveled abroad to compete in 2009.
That was Denmark, right?
Denmark.
I remember.
The experience.
It was a big deal.
It was a very big deal because also was one of the first European events to have 2 American teams compete in that.
Right.
It was pretty much the biggest Call of Duty event ever back then. We lost all our matches, but our group was composed of the winner of the tournament, of the 3rd place, and of the only team in the whole tournament to beat the winner.
Right.
And we actually gave everyone a good run for the money. I think we were probably like in the top 25 of Europe back then, and that was all thanks to kind of like the mentality and the skill of, like, I wasn't playing, obviously. I had long stopped playing, so it was people like Matthew, who had a brilliant tactical mind, brilliant ethic when it came to playing and to training and to kind of doing all of the right things. A brutal mindset, actually. You know, if you're not good, you could be your best friend. You know, you're not going to lose the team. He's going to get cut. So that was also kind of the Matthew's mentality. If there's someone that is better than you, you're going to get replaced.
Yeah.
And people used to say kind of, you're poaching from other teams, you're destroying other teams to make sure you succeed. But ultimately, kind of the goal there was to make a dent in Europe.
It's the reality to be good at anything.
Yes.
If you want to be good at business, you ultimately need to surround yourself with good performing people.
Yeah.
When
Real Madrid and Barcelona never worry about not poaching players from other teams. So.
It's a war out there, right? It's a war zone, and you need to just fire first, I guess. But like even in World of Warcraft, most recently raiding in a top 150 world rank guild out of thousands and thousands of guilds or communities, for those who are listening to these 2 nerds talk about video games. But and you'll be like, oh, you're playing a video game in your mid-30s. And I'm like, it's such a good feeling knowing that you are in the top, like, how many things in your life have you done that you're in the top 150 of the world of, And the mentality resonated in there as well, which is if you're not good enough, you are getting replaced.
I think it's also a transferable skill in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to be able to replace dead weight very quickly in your business.
Yeah, I know that if I had my own company and I wanted to employ a CEO, the person who I picked to be CEO would be Matthew, because I know his work ethic, right? Yeah,
you need someone like that, someone who is indiscriminately passionate about the job and will put that thing first. Absolutely. And I think, again, surrounding yourself with the right people, eliminating the bad apples very quickly as well, is something that you need to do. And in any sport that happens. In football, it happens. In rugby, I'm sure it happens. In tennis, tennis maybe you just want. But in tennis, you just lose if you're not good enough.
Yeah, but tennis is a very good example, because tennis is a very top-heavy sport.
Yes.
In the sense that the first maybe top 100 players, the international tennis players, make a lot of money.
Yeah.
The guy who's 101st is probably
having to work full time somewhere else. Yeah.
Can't sustain himself with the sport. There's a big drop off, And
it's the same in gaming. It's like top 100 girls in World of Warcraft. They're all usually from like I'm talking about World of Warcraft because it's the game I've recently been playing competitively, which I've stopped now. But if you go from like rank 30 to rank 100, they're all people who are like normal people that don't really feed off of that sport. Get to the top 20s, then you start seeing people that are kind of semi-pros, but still, you'll only get the people in the top 3 guilds or the top 4 that are actually doing it full time. And not even that, some people still work and do jobs on the back of that. So it's just not black and white.
Yeah.
And it is also very top heavy. And gaming is like that, unfortunately, as well. Like unless you're a top.
Well, I don't think it's unfortunately. I think.
Well, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And I mean, let's face it. Come on, it's a video game. There are of which there are hundreds. There are hundreds of competitive video games. You're at the peak of one of them. Kind of like you're productivity levels of society are what they are. You're a part of the entertainment world, similar to a football player.
Yeah.
The difference is that a football player has audiences of, I don't know, 5 billion, but an esports player has an audience of 200,000. So
yeah, that's the difference. So going back to Eversio, so there was the golden age of Call of Duty, 2014. There was a bit of a lull after that,
yes,
I think.
Very much so.
And the revival of Eversio happened with Overwatch, right?
2016.
I was there.
Yeah.
2016, I remember, is when we, I think we got a call from you or something, right?
Probably from Matthew, actually.
We were doing pretty well.
Yeah.
It was very unfortunate that we never really won anything. I think we won. Did we win it?
No,
I don't think we won anything as Overwatch.
No.
We were very close, but there was like really good competition locally.
Yeah.
So that was unfortunate, and I wish I gave the game more time. Even though I gave the game a lot of time, personally. And then there was PlayerUnknown, which we actually did win.
Yeah.
A couple of tournaments. That was fun.
Yeah.
You should be talking through this, not me.
So I mean, there were so many games. I mean, I recently kind of like made a list of what we went through, because that was the teams that you were involved in, right?
Yes.
Same time we were going through Call of Duty on consoles.
Tekken.
Tekken is a more recent thing. And
I remember Tekken during the Overwatch days.
Yes. We had 3 players. Now we have fresh new talents, and they're blazing the trail for esports in Malta, to be honest. Leon is, I would say, like a star player. He travels 8 to 10 times a year to compete in international tournaments. We help him out in that. He's placed top 8 in the biggest European tournaments. Awesome. He was in a tournament just this weekend. Playcon guys flew over 3 Korean professional players, Red Bull sponsored and all that. He was the only one who managed to beat one of them.
Good guy, Leon.
He's the kind of guy that everyone basically pretty much in the European scene knows about. If you ask any professional Tekken player in Europe, you say Leon, they know who it is, and he's the guy carrying the Maltese flag internationally.
How cool is that, right?
It's
having it under your Eversio banner as well.
Yeah, it's and I'm also extremely grateful to him and to the rest of the team, Joseph, Caneo, and all the others. They do a really good job, and also kind of the other guys behind the scenes, like Jandre, Nathan, and all those guys that's give their all. And this is a voluntary thing, right? We don't make money, and it's designed in this way on purpose. So if I had to talk a bit about esports in a general way rather than about Eversio, because also, maybe you don't know, but I'm also the president of the Malta Esports Association. And this is something that we created a couple of years ago to try and kind of like bring a bit of structure into the esports space in Malta, and try to kind of like upgrade where we are. Right. Now, the unfortunate reality is that over the past maybe 8 years, esports was a massive buzzword. There were huge amounts of venture capital that went into esports, potentially undeservedly so. I think the idea of esports as a profitable product was a bit oversold. There are people who are making a huge amount of money from esports, especially the game companies. Companies like Riot, Blizzard, and so on, and also players are making a lot of money. Pro players, can earn salaries of pro Counter-Strike players make salaries of 30,000. Pro League of Legends players make hundreds of thousands, millions probably. Streaming is a big part of it, but a lot of other businesses within the esports sector are finding it very hard for monetization. So when we restarted Eversio back in 2016, we were very aware of the situation. I was still involved in the scene, maybe not through Eversio, but I was a writer for a lot of international news websites and so on, like a reporter. So I was quite aware of kind of what's going on and the economics behind it. And there's another thing behind the economics of esports, right? Like with entertainment products worldwide, it all depends on economies of scale. And you can't be in a worse country than Malta for something like that. Yeah. Even in Europe, it struggles, because if you're an Italian team and you're, broadcasting in Italian, it's Italians.
You're limiting your audience.
If you're American and you're broadcasting in English, the whole world is watching you. So I think in esports that issue is amplified, and it's an extremely, extremely hard business.
It is.
If you look at it as a business. I decided that I'm not going to look at it as a business, because my main business is legal and compliance. And that's where I,
But it's the same as podcasting, like when we started, I was very clear. I was like, I'm not in it for,
Yeah. You need to make your
the money. It's more about the journey, I guess, of like enjoying the whole thing. Yeah.
I think in general you just need to make your kind of what you want to achieve out of this clear. Like if you go into esports kind of with the idea to make money, you better have a really rock solid business plan to back you up, because it's a very difficult market to be profitable in. You're much more likely to make money off any other business than you are from esports, generally speaking, I think. So
it's one of those things that if you do it well, you'll get rewarded, but it's very easy to fail through it as well.
Reward is a big word. I think basically to make money in esports, you need to spend 5 times as much effort and energy as you have to for basically any other thing. And then you are mildly successful, but it's still nowhere close. You're at the mercy of so esports has over the past 10 years, esports has become the industry of the game developers. Before that, it was kind of like an industry that is self-governed and self-fulfilling, right? So it was, people who are passionate about things, organizing tournaments, that those tournaments grew. Okay, maybe they became businesses. But once the big boys came into town, once the big boys like Riot Games, Blizzard, and so on started kind of regulating the whole thing and enforcing their intellectual property, then esports stopped.
Blizzard was big on that. Was like Riot.
Everyone was.
Was it?
Now
because I remember Blizzard being really gatekeepers of that.
Yes. Yeah, all of them are. Except Valve is probably the most hands-off one, and that's why Counter-Strike and Dota flourish so much. But everyone is a fierce protector of their IP.
If you look at like Riot exploded like with League, and it was just insane.
And League is a 10-12-year-old game.
2009,
still going on extremely strongly until nowadays.
And like look at Overwatch. Overwatch was great, golden goose of Blizzard, and they killed it right with the Overwatch League. They tried.
I think this was
a really
too much. Bad implementation.
Oh yeah. They killed Overwatch was fun because you could compete all the time, and when they introduced the Overwatch League, they just eliminated that.
Yeah.
Again, they tried to gatekeep the competitive edge of Overwatch, and they just put the top 1% of the Overwatch teams, and that's where we stopped playing. I remember it was just dead. That there was no more. There used to be weekend tournaments, like every weekend.
Overwatch contenders, but it still did not have the glamour of. No. You no longer had the option, the opportunity to make it. Very, very, very few people actually could live the dream. The moment that Blizzard killed the dream with the Overwatch League, that's how it died, and that's an amazing game, right?
It is, but the game's dead now.
I wouldn't say it's dead. I think it's
a very casual game. You don't really compete.
It's a casual game. I mean, I think there is an element of competition within it, and I think sometimes because the media carries this element that Overwatch is dead, people forget that it's actually still a very popular game. I watched some podcasts and compared to, for example, tier 2 titles in the esports space, it still has the same amount of a player base. So it still has a very big player base.
Interesting.
I watched a very popular kind of like podcaster in the esports world saying that kind of Overwatch and Valorant are head to head. Now Valorant is Riot Games' baby.
Riot Games seem to like keep getting it right though. Like everything they
depends who you ask.
But they do. But well.
LCS, for example, right now.
Like
a really bad time.
Yeah, LCS now is going, but I mean the LCS has been around now for.
Yes. Yeah.
Over 10 years.
Yeah.
It's okay. Maybe it's going through a tough time now because they've had to probably make some cost cuts. I heard right, and you've got pro players retiring now and stuff like that, which is fine. It happens, This has been going for 10 years, over 10 years.
Like 30-year-old esports player, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And I know. Tell me about it. But it's. God, what's the worst thing about gaming in mid 30s now? My ears, like I can't play with headphones anymore because I have really bad tinnitus. I think I'm starting to lose hearing from this ear because today I was at work and I switched phones and I couldn't hear the guy. Like I literally had to switch back. So it's probably a result of too much hours with headphones on. But that's the biggest thing because I feel my focus has got better as I got older. But that's interesting. So like. Going back to Eversio, so what are your games now? What games are Eversio playing?
So Tekken is still kind of like pretty much our flagship. We have a burgeoning League of Legends team. CS2 is something that obviously we have very strong plans about. Rocket League, we were just champions again ClayCon last weekend. It's like obviously like we want to focus on the esports that actually can make a difference to what we're trying to do. And I am kind of like a bit of what we call an esports purist. You know, you look at the esports games that are the more popular titles, you know, the ones that will give you viewership, the ones that have international viewership and proper competitive structure, and those would be League of Legends, Dota 2, Counter-Strike, Valorant, and so on. Rocket League is probably like a good example of a tier 2 title. Like tier 1 is League of Legends, CS2, and Dota. Tier 2 probably would be something like Valorant and Rocket League. So we really want to make sure that kind of like we do well in CS2 and League of Legends, that we're a good representation of that. Again, kind of as I was saying before, kind of the idea that, you know, we're a voluntary organization, but we also kind of we have a specific scope in mind. We don't have the scope of like winning a world championship. We don't want, I mean, if it comes, you know, it's great, but you know, it's the likelihood of that is that you know, hometown team of I don't know, Zurri or Erendi wins the Champions League. You know, it's the same. It's the same thing. It's just not going to happen. So
it might if you grow big enough, I guess, but
it's very unlikely. The aim that we're trying to put out there is that, you know, we nourish local talent. We help them. We expose them to international competition. We send them abroad, and ideally, the idea is that kind of like they find kind of like a bigger team where they can become a professional. So we're not in a position. I don't think we'll ever be in a position where we can offer things like salaries, for example. It's just that the economic model in Malta it doesn't work unless you go international. And then if you decide to go international, you have unending competition. Malta's a really kind of like the fact that we're Maltese. It's a really bad place to kind of like start from, because your hometown is, you know, you don't have a home fan base, or the home fan base is extremely small. I mean, you look at the teams that are popular, you know, Cloud9, everyone knows that they're the American team. You know, if you look at Vitality, everyone knows that they're the French team. NIP is the Swedish team. Fnatic is the British team. All right, you have Eversio is the Maltese
Fnatic
team
still being around. Eversio is definitely the Maltese.
That's what we try to put out, but we are realistic in that kind of like our role is as that we nourish the talent, we grow it, and hopefully someone else kind of like and the players that we nourish eventually get where they need to be. And, you know, we've had some success in that. We have had at least 3 players who became professional players. I don't want to take the credit for it, because it was entirely their doing, but they are ex-players. So, you know,
they went through the Eversio Academy.
I don't even want to call it academy, because I don't think it was us. I think it was kind of their determination. Like some of them we gave opportunities, especially like, for example, someone like Shaka, who's, you know, Malta's best ever Counter-Strike player. We had a team where Shaka was the only Maltese player. Then it was a mixed team of Dutch and Belgian players. We were competing in the Benelux League. We participated in the Benelux League and we placed twice second in the Benelux League. So basically we were the second best team from the Benelux, which is obviously not a small region, considering Netherlands alone has 17 million inhabitants. So and eventually that team was acquired by KRC Genk. And if you know your football, KRC Genk is basically the best football team in Belgium.
No, I don't know my football.
And then he became a salaried player. And that all came out of, you know, us forking out money to send them to the Benelux League, you know, send 5 players abroad, send them to the Netherlands, then to Belgium, and they were competing, and, you know, then they made it. Cupert's, you know, it was all his determination, all his efforts. I can't take any credit for that. He went on to become a Cloud9 player. That's awesome. The biggest achievement.
So wait, was it Eversio into Cloud9, or did he have a few more stepping stones?
No, he had a few stepping stones. So, you know, awesome. He was with us to try and kind of create a Valorant team, but he very, very quickly outgrew us, because, you know, he's a worldwide star. So. Awesome. And most recently Hido in League of Legends. Again, I can't take credit for any of it, but, you know, He went into the NLC, which is the Scandinavian and British League of Legends league. He placed second in his first outing as a rookie in that league. He was voted top rookie in the entire Scandinavian British Isles region. And now he's playing for the French league, which is the biggest league in Europe. Earns a very handsome salary. Those are success stories, you know.
Yeah, man. Obviously, I'm very proud to have been part of the journey, and I hope to be part of the journey in the future when I have some time to give you again. Because I know we talked about this not long ago, I think, was it?
No.
I would love to get involved again.
It's something that, you know, if you're passionate about and you have the time, you both at the same time.
The passion is there, I can tell you.
Yeah, but the time is. I know.
But before, so for example, I think before the problem was that I had the passion, but I was also a player.
Yeah.
And you know how much time you need to invest, and obviously working full time with kids, and then having to invest time to compete, and then having to invest time to also support with running the organization or it's hard.
Tell me about it.
But now I don't compete anymore, so at least. Also now I've got a podcast as well, but still,
it's always.
But luckily I've got some amazing people helping me out with it, and we're growing as a team, which is great. But I would love to be part of it again in the future. So I'll hit you up later. We'll talk about it. Cool. So thank you. Really, really random two subject matters, which they're a bit entwined.
They converge somewhere, yeah.
But we went into finance, we went into gaming, we went into gambling, we went into crypto, some politics, but not that much actually, to be fair. No, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you. I hope you feel the same.
Likewise, yeah, enjoyable. Very
I hope you've enjoyed coming on the podcast. I know it was like really last minute as well because I had another guest lined up, but that guest unfortunately cancelled, and you were like, "Yeah, I'll do it." I was like, "Fuck yeah, let's go, let's do it." So thank you, Michele, for coming on.
No problem.
Really,
my pleasure.
really great having you, and I hope that we'll connect soon again.
Yeah,
cheers, man.
Indeed. Thanks, dude.
Thanks, buddy. Cheers.